Ever notice how someone's eyes, like, they can almost look like a different color depending on where they are?
Yeah.
Inside they're blue, and then you go outside and it's like, wait, are those green?
Right.
So it's not just you. It's like a real thing. And the science behind it is actually pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah.
We're going to do a deep dive on that today.
Let's do it.
I think what's so interesting about it is that we think of eye color as like, oh, blue eyes, brown eyes, like it's the set thing.
Right.
But it's not like paint. It's way more interesting than that.
It really is. It's really about how light interacts with your eye.
Right.
Particularly the iris.
Okay, so break that down for me a little bit. So it's not even really about like the pigment, like we think of pigment.
It's not just about the pigment, like the amount of pigment. You think about like a blue sky, the air itself isn't blue.
Right. It's the light.
It's the way it scatters the light.
How we're perceiving it.
It's the scattering. So similar with eyes, especially lighter colored eyes, like your blues, your greens, your grays.
Right.
What happens is there's actually less pigment in the iris.
Okay.
So more light is passing through, bouncing around.
Okay.
And that's what's creating that illusion of color, almost like a prism effect.
Wow. Okay, so it's almost like our eyes are tricking us a little bit with physics.
Yeah, it's true.
And this is like blowing my mind because we were looking at this research from Paul Elms Bacardi.
Yeah.
And he was talking about all these different factors that actually impact like how we perceive that color.
Right.
And one of them is, and this makes sense now that we're talking about light, is lighting.
Lighting, absolutely. The type of light that hits your eyes makes a huge difference. I mean, think about being under a warm lamp versus being out on a cloudy day.
Right.
Like the wavelengths of light are different, so the way those wavelengths interact with the pigments in your eyes is going to be different as well.
So it's like natural sunlight is basically like a full spectrum.
A spectrum light show, yeah.
Light show for our eyes.
It's hitting all those pigments at once.
Interesting.
So you're going to see potentially a wider range of those colors,
Right. Because it's bouncing off of, or it's hitting it, but then there's also what it's bouncing off of, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're wearing a bright green shirt.
Exactly.
Does that really make a difference?
It can. It can, because our eyes naturally pick up on these reflections. So if you're wearing a bright green shirt and you have, blue eyes,
right,
some of that green light's going to bounce back to the observer, mix with the way the eye is already scattering light, and all of a sudden those blue eyes might look a little teal, a little more greenish. Yeah.
It's so wild. Our eyes are like low-key messing with us constantly.
Constantly.
And then this is what I thought was really interesting too.
Yeah.
Was that even the structure of our eye can play a role in it. Like the actual, he was talking about the pigment distribution.
Yes.
Can be different.
Even within, say, the category of blue eyes, there are microscopic variations in how that pigment is spread throughout the iris.
Oh, wow.
Some people might have a more even distribution, while others have it a bit more concentrated in certain areas. And so that can create even more pronounced color shifts depending on the light, the surrounding colors.
It's like each iris is totally unique.
It is.
Like a fingerprint.
It is, yeah.
But for your eyes.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And that actually makes me think too, because like our eyes can even change color a bit as we age.
They do, absolutely.
So how does that work into this whole thing?
So in childhood, the pigment in iris is actually still developing.
Oh, wow.
So as we get older, that distribution can change, and that can lead to some subtle shifts in eye color. And for some people, those shifts might be more obvious than others.
Right.
It all comes back to those individual variations.
And I know the research we were looking at had mentioned specifically that like blue-green eyes or like gray-blue eyes tend to be the ones that are like really noticeable when this happens.
Yeah.
Do we know why that is?
So the research didn't explicitly say, but if we kind of connect it back to this idea of pigment distribution, it's possible that those colors sit in a kind of middle ground. They're not as heavily pigmented as, say, brown eyes, but also not as sparsely pigmented as like a very light blue eye. So it could be that any slight variation in lighting or surrounding color is just enough to tip the scales and make that change in appearance much more perceptible.
So they're almost like this perfectly balanced canvas. For like all these external factors to come in and play. That's wild.
It's really interesting.
So, okay, what does this all mean for all of us out there walking around, looking at each other's eyes?
I think it just shows that the way we perceive the world, even something as seemingly constant as eye color is a lot more complex than we might realize. And it makes you wonder, what other subtleties are we missing? Just, because we're not viewing things under the right light or in the right context.
Well, all right, everyone out there, take that with you.